I guess my question is, if we agree that certain cultural practices can make people behave better, and certain cultural practices can make people behave worse, shouldn't we be doing everything we can to make people behave better? And that's what we did in the classical political arrangement of society, right? You know, the basic point of politics is do good and avoid evil. Then, under liberalism, you had a new point of society. The new point of society was to just expand individual autonomy maximally, on the, I think, false supposition that that would make people happier. And we've had a couple hundred years now, and we've seen how it's played out, and it hasn't played out very well at all. So why don't we go back to the one that worked for all of human history?
So, one, do you think that's possible or going to happen? And two, would you then be in favor, because education, female education, seems to be a big predictor of, one, we're the only ones whose marriage rates are not falling, they're going up, and we're less likely to get divorced. So do you then, would you advise women, instead of getting married really young and living this traditional lifestyle, to maybe go get educated
the best predictor of women staying married and flourishing and having lots of kids and being happy and not even trying to get divorced, it's not education, though education is some predictor of that. It's
big one.
It's religion.
Yeah, you're true, but you can't make people, we're just becoming less religious as a society. This thing you guys have where let's turn the clock back, let's turn the clock back.
I don't want to turn any clocks back. I just want to turn our heads back to reason.
You can't make
and reason
people
is founded
believe in
logic,
something.
Who is God.
Yeah, exactly. But the logic and the reason and the age of information, a lot of people now have access to it, and they're going, actually, this kind of seems like bullshit. And you can't make
No, I don't think that's why people have become irreligious. I don't think it's because they've all gotten much better educated and read a lot more books.
They read Christopher Hitchens. I agree with you.
No, I think they heard a Christopher Hitchens video once, and which is
it's undeniable
that
more and more people are identifying as non-religious, that this is just the trend that it's going in. And
yes
I don't know
no.
how
yes
much,
no.
as great as the Daily Wire is, how much you guys are going to be able to reverse that. So maybe we should look at how we can move forward with the society we have, instead of trying to turn the clock back in a way that
But it's not a clock. It's not a clock. We're not going. I'm not making a time machine. I'm just saying that there's truth and there's falsehood, and we are embracing a lot of falsehood in society, and that's leading to a lot of ugliness and a lot of depravity. And if we want less of all that stuff, and we want more like good, true, and beautiful things, maybe we should use our reason to recognize really basic things like God exists. I'm not telling you've got to come to traditional Latin Mass tomorrow. You could wait until Sunday. But at the very least, we should recognize, hey guys, some things are better than others, right? The minute you grant that some things are better than others, ultimately you have to grant that there is a maximal good, a summum bonum, who is God, right? We should recognize, hey guys, effects follow causes. And if you go back on the list of causes far enough, there's going to be an uncaused cause, who is God. And
there's really great arguments against
Jasmine,
this.
before I have you go, I would like to hear a little bit more from Farah, if you'd like to weigh in.
I was just going to ask, maybe I missed it. So what do you think the ideal form of marriage is? Like the woman goes to college and then she meets a guy in college and then she taps out of her career?
I don't know that going to college is really great for anybody these days. I'm pro-education, obviously. I mean, and I'm not even one of these conservatives who says, you should all just study engineering or whatever. I think that's bunk. I think you should read old books and acculturate yourself. But I don't think most colleges accomplish this these days, including the really fancy colleges, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. I don't know that maybe you can get an education there. I'm not totally convinced you can. And so, I get women should be educated. But, frankly, these days, you send your kids to a homeschool co-op, they'll start learning Latin in the 3rd grade. You send your kids on the track to go to Yale or Harvard, and they're probably not going to know anything by the time they graduate. I would love my wife to be educated. My wife is extremely educated, and I would love my wife to be a wife and a mother. And I guess the image that I think of for marriage is not as, the modern way of talking about it, where you say, this is my partner. It sounds like a gay accounting firm, this is my total indistinguishable partner. No, I want a wife, man, and I want a mother for my children. I want to be a father, and that involves different roles, and that involves complementarity.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So are you saying that maybe they'll get educated outside of college, reading books or whatever, and then after that they should focus at age 23, 24, getting married, and then not pursuing a career and focus on family life? Yeah,
I'm not going to prescribe exactly at what age people ought to get married. They certainly ought to get married younger. I wish I'd gotten married younger. But I don't...
But you would prescribe that they focus on a career with precedence?
Generally speaking, I think women will be less happy if they are going to the widget factory to work for Mr. McGillicuddy so that they can make money that I will then receive from my wife to pay some other woman to raise our children. Mm-hmm. I think that's an extremely inefficient and disordered way to have a marriage, and I don't think it makes anybody particularly happy.
I guess it confuses me coming from a tradcon, because you guys believe in the design of a lot of things. You believe in the design of sex and what's the most optimal optimal use of sex? Why did God
Like
give
the
us
purpose
sex?
of, like, the
Yes, and you would
telos,
say
yeah.
like the end of sex would be to pair bond and reproduce. So if women were not meant to pursue careers, why would God, according to your Christian purview, you're Christian, right?
Yeah.
Like equip us with so many rational faculties. Like why are women so good at like aerospace engineering, nanotech, pediatrics,
I don't know if I'd say they're
psychiatry?
so good at aerospace engineering.
Why are
but
women? Why are
maybe
women
there's a few
scoring
out
higher
there,
than you
know.
guys in
I'm just
every
saying,
subject?
why is it
Yeah,
that
they're not totally represented in these fields.
my
but,
question is
sure.
if tradcons use God as like their purview for, you know what I mean, use our faculties as the metric
Well, you
for
don't
what
even
we
have
should
to be religious
pursuing,
about this.
why is it that women are now outgraduating men like basically 2-to-1, but then you guys are
Because the colleges
prescribing
are total nonsense now, and they have a bunch of fake majors, and it's a scam.
Is law a fake major? Because this is now we have more female first year associates.
Right,
than men.
yeah, and law school is largely a scam
I guess
too,
my-
and you've got a glut of lawyers.
well,
many
my
of whom can't
question
get
is,
jobs.
why would God equip us with these things, these faculties, if God did not want us as women to pursue these faculties and instead abandon it at first step for marriage and kids?
The premise of your question is that raising children and running a family in the domestic economy is not a rational activity.
It's not that it's a rational
integrated.
activity, but
Why
why
give
equip us to be
more?
so good at STEM and college
What
and
could
all
be
these
more?
pursuits?
What could be
No,
more
no, no.
important than raising a
I'm not
family?
saying, I'm saying why give women the ability to both have a child and still be able to read like intellectual texts or
To educate the
to look
child.
at aerospace engineering. Well, that's the thing. You can
Wait,
educate
so
a
raise your kid
child,
to be an aerospace engineer, I
Wait,
guess,
wait.
if
but
you're
you
really
can't be an
interested in
aerospace
that.
engineer yourself.
Women can if they like. They generally don't do that.
No, I'm
But,
asking. So is that your position, that God equipped women to be as good at STEM, to outgraduate men, all to just
yeah,
pursue
they're not
homeschooling
You know,
for
if you
their
look
children?
at like Fields Medal recipients, Larry Summers got fired from Harvard for pointing this out. But this is the top prize in mathematics. Until about 10 years ago, no woman had ever won the prize, and now I think one woman has won it. And I'm not knocking. There are plenty of women who are much more intelligent than me. The reason Larry Summers, who's as far as social scientists goes, is a very respected one, and he's a big lib. But he pointed out that the reason why men tend to dominate in the highest intellectual fields is not because men are simply smarter than women, but because the bell curve of intelligence for men is wider than that of women. So
But for a society, isn't it like societies that allow women to work, even us, if we hadn't had women, we brought in like trillions of dollars to the economy to take out half of the minds in the world. In the world,
Yeah, I
because
think life
the
is
bell
about more than
curve,
money.
the top. I agree, but if you want a flourishing, wealthy society, you can't do
I
that
don't
by
think we're
eliminating
I don't
women
think-
from the workforce.
I agree that we're wealthier today than we were 50 years ago. I'm not sure that we're flourishing more than we are. I mean, we are literally a dying society, right? We haven't had above replacement births since 1971.
Would you
Yeah,
be okay
well-
with immigration as a way to?
That's why we have mass migration, but mass migration causes all sorts of social problems,
Wait.
which is why it's deeply
Before we
unpopular,
pivot,
including on the
I do want
left.
to pin down your position on this. So yes, the bell curve is wider for men, but on average, the average women are smarter than the average men. Obviously, at the ends of the curves, there's
There's
more
not be implied
unintelligent
by-
men and more
the
high
first-
intelligent.
The first thing you said that wouldn't imply the second, right?
It's not implied. That's just the fact. Is the bell curve is wider for men? Like there's more
Right. So that-
unintelligent
so that
men
would-
and
are
more
you-
intelligent men.
Are you
Right.
talking about the greater male variability hypothesis? Is that
I'm
Yeah.
saying there's
Okay.
on average women are more intelligent than men, but if you look at the most intelligent people, they're more likely
But
to be
if-
men. If you
if-
look at the least intelligent
the first
people,
thing-
they're less likely to be men. So I'm asking you from your Christian purview, because if you're a nihilist, you're atheist, you could just be like, oh, that's randomized, who cares? It doesn't necessarily mean it's best for
If
society.
you're a nihilist, you can't say anything at all, because nothing means anything.
Well, that was my point. If you're a nihilist, you could just say those curves should not be indication of how we should live society. But as a Christian, if you think sex is most optimized for certain purposes, you would probably think intelligence is best optimized for certain purposes. So why would God equip the average woman to be smarter than men? Do you think it's just for homeschooling their children?
Again, the claim that you made at first, which is that men and women have bell curves, the men's bell curve being wider than the woman's, would not imply that the average woman is smarter than the average man.
Oh, no.
It would line them up
the
exactly.
curve
right?
itself
Yeah.
implies or actually indicates that
No, it would
on
just be the
average.
extremes.
No,
Right,
no,
it
no.
would-
If you actually look at the curves at the top, it's women. The women's curve is taller than the men's curve.
The IQ of the curve would be on the x-axis, right? That's where you get the extremes. So I think.
So are you disputing that on average women are more intelligent
Yes.
than men?
As would Larry Summers, as would the people who have studied this. But again, I think it's secondary to the point. Your point is
My
the more
point
interesting
is, why
point
would
of your
God equip us with,
why
to
would
be
God make
so
women
good at
smart?
school
Yeah,
and
yeah.
STEM?
Yeah, yeah.
If women on average were doing really, really poorly in STEM and all these, like if men
Sure.
were the one outgraduating us 2-to-1, then I can understand from a Christian purview saying like, see, God doesn't want you to be good at school because God wants you to focus on these more domestic pursuits.
Yeah.
But how can you look at all this evidence and think that we're, you know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
so specifically designed by God and then deny that?
I think you've bought about the big lie of feminism that goes back to Mary Wollstonecraft, which is that men are endowed with greater virtue than women. And I think it's just bunk.
It's saying the opposite.
You're saying, what you're saying is that the most important things to do, the most impressive things to do, just the greatest stuff to do, is to do what most men do, which is go out and work some job.
No, I didn't even moralize. I didn't even say that STEM and aerospace and all these industries that women are good at are even morally good. I was just saying they happen to be good at these things. So from a Christian purview, you're the one who would ascribe morality to that.
You're saying it's better to do that, I think, because you're saying
from a Christian purview, because you think from a Christian purview, what you're good at is what you should do. So if women are better at childrearing, they should do that. If sex is best used in this specific then people should do that.
In that narrow reading, then I think it's pretty clear most women are better at raising children than building rocket ships. So I think probably most women would prefer that. But even more broadly, I think you're exalting male professions in a foolish way. I think that you're
I'm not even hyping them up. I'm just asking you.
I think you are hyping
from
them up.
Your theist purview, why would God make women so good at STEM and college and all these pursuits if God just wanted us to tap out as soon as we met a man and just focus
I'm
on
not
child
sure.
rearing?
Look, women do fine on certain tests, but
We're doing great.
You're doing
on
great.
a lot of tests.
Sure.
Better than you.
Well, perhaps. I don't know.
No, I mean, the future
I
of-
defer to your knowledge of your...
The future of academia is unequivocally female. Do you deny that?
I agree that the future of academia is bleak. And so if you think that it implies that women will dominate academia, then you said it, not me. But I don't think that the future of anything is female. I think the future of the human race will be the complementarity of the sexes and marriages and children, or there will be no future of the human race.
This is something I also wanted to point out to earlier. You're saying that people are having less children, that's a bad thing, but I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. And the reason why, at least from what we see when we compare better developed countries to less developed countries, is that people are choosing to have fewer children, but they're choosing to invest more in those fewer children. So back in agricultural times, people had to have a lot of children because they had to have those children work in the farm, basically take over chores, take over a bunch of stuff. So they would have 7 or 8 children, a lot of times malnourished, a lot of them died, versus now where it's they might have 1 or 2 children, but those children are well fed, they're getting well educated,
they're getting all
in
the best psychiatric
home.
drugs in the country.
Well, do you think that, I guess here's the other problem. Earlier on, we were talking about hey, you know what, things are getting better measured now than before. That's why the whole thing about people are less happy now is not necessarily true. Do you think that, let's say, middle of nowhere country in Africa or something, where they're malnourished, have a family of 7, do you think those people are happier because they can't report it? Or they're living technically more of a traditional lifestyle than somebody in a Nordic country or a European country?
Yeah, I think the word traditional is doing a lot of work there. I agree that, sub-Saharan Africa and Oklahoma are different, but I don't think it's a totally fair comparison. And I agree it's better to be nourished than to be malnourished. I agree with that as well. But I don't think that one necessarily needs 2 lawyer incomes and a Tesla and a big screen TV and 5 iPhones to be able to thrive and flourish. I think we've become far too materialistic, and we now know the price of everything and the value of nothing. So we've got more money than ever, but we're all miserable.
But when you cited the data on the 2-parent households, but socioeconomic status and education, especially maternal education, are big predictors of childhood outcomes. So how come the data on two-parent households, we should follow that, but not the one on...
I'm fine with women being smart. I like when women are smart and well-educated, because they're raising my children, One is raising my children. I'm not... If I were living in Africa, maybe I'd have 5...
This is where you deviate from the red pill.
Right, true. But, it is said that the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. So when a man chooses a woman to be his wife and to raise his family, he is entrusting her with his life, so I don't think he wants her to be a dummy or to be vicious or to be anything like that. He would have no incentive to do so.
But it's better to have fewer kids that you can, it seems like, provide more for and make sure than to have 10 kids and none of those kids end up being or flourishing.
I think it's good to be open to life. I think that one of the big problems in our society is that we've embraced sterility. So we're sterile intellectually, artistically, philosophically, and literally. We don't have any kids, and we exalt as some kind of supposed political right sterile forms of sex. So I wouldn't recommend that at all. And I think when you get married, to my earlier point, you're giving yourself wholly over to another person. And so you shouldn't withhold anything. You should be totally open to life for the unity of the spouses.
Is that practical in modern society?
I
feel
can
like you have a
tell
very
you from
idealistic view.
Oh, no, I think I can tell you from experience.
Well, you're
it's
very
totally
successful.
practical.
You're
Oh, thank
very
you.
successful.
That's
You're
very
not
kind.
struggling to feed your kids.
I'm not. I haven't been totally canceled yet. That's true. But I know people who make less money than I do.
I have
a
some
lot
points
less money,
to-
and they've got a million kids, and
Here,
they're very
Pixie,
happy.
you go ahead,
Yeah.
and I will shift gears a little bit after you go. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I just have some points of clarification quickly. So if you believe that people should be like open to life, do you believe basically should we have like universal child daycare? Do you believe that we
No,
should
I think
have
we should
some-
have mothers and fathers.
Okay. Do you not, if you're talking about how women should be more traditional or stay at home more, but you agree that our current economic circumstance doesn't necessarily allow for that household, it seems to me like one potential solution to this would be like, hey, you know what, better paternal and maternity leave. So then that way, like the household doesn't suffer the income, but
Listen,
the woman can go.
I support 18 years of maternity leave. I think, forget about 18 months. I think it should be 18 years.
Paid?
Do you believe women should be paid for staying in the household?
You know, in principle, I'm not opposed to it. The problem is it would create so many bad incentives, and it would be so inefficiently managed by the central
Well,
government.
18 years.
But you
would be-
wouldn't.
18 years would be tough. But
I
you know,
don't know, we
in
should maybe
principle,
have at least
but
something.
to your point, in principle, look, there's one country in the West that has managed to turn around the birth rate problem, and they haven't solved it yet, but they've ticked it up a little bit in the opposite direction, and that's Hungary. And the way they did it was they said that once you have 4 kids, you don't have to pay income tax anymore. And that's a great way to encourage people to have kids. So, you know, I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
disagree with that.
You know, like, would I suggest that we just start sending checks for each baby that you pop out? That's probably an overly simplistic way to do it. But should the government, which is really an expression of the people and self-government, should we encourage and support having families rather than passing laws that discourage families? 100%.
Yeah, I'm for pro-family policy. I think we all are.
Yeah.
Pixie, did you have more?
No, I was just trying to see if you agreed with that or not, because I've met a couple conservatives who are like, oh no, we shouldn't pass laws like that. So
Yeah, well, the libertarians get feisty about any time you say that we should do anything in politics. But no, I'm fine as long as it's prudent. The point that you raised at first, though, would be terribly wrong, which would be to say, all right, now we've got guaranteed daycare. That would only make the problem worse, right? If we want families to be stronger and we want families to be incentivized to have more children and to raise their own children.
Sorry, I do have one more thing. I
Yes.
guess what I don't understand is that earlier you were talking about the community. The community is important. Like liberals are like too individualized.
Yeah.
But to me, it seems like programs like universal daycare or such of the matter do foster a sense of community. I don't think a child was meant to be raised by just one single person, like not even just a mom.
Nor
It's
do
meant to
I.
be
I think,
raised
it,
by
I
the
think there's at least 2
community.
people involved.
Yeah, I think more. I think we live a
Community,
whole
yeah.
society that, you know,
Right.
should take
So-
care of the children.
Yeah. So your insight is, or your inclination is right, which is, you know, it takes a village. Much as I dislike Hillary Clinton, that phrase itself is not objectionable. But it takes a village. It doesn't, I don't think it takes a contrived product of some technocracy that creates the, you know, sterile and clinical preschool program, daycare program. That's not a real organic community. That's not a community where people are accountable to one another, where people have natural bonds that begin with the family and extend to the extended family and then to the neighborhood and to Mrs. McGillicuddy down the street.
How would you make, because religion has done a really good job at this, creating these fostering these communities, but the bottom line is people just don't believe in it. There's a question if it's beneficial and if it's true. What's your plan to convince more
Well-
people that it's true and that they should
Yeah,
follow
yeah.
it? Because everything is pointing the opposite way. We're going the opposite way.
Beneficial means is good, and true means is true. And some people think these are divorced. I don't
are.
think they're divorced. Well, I think I hold to an old-fashioned view that there are the 3 transcendentals, which is goodness, truth, and beauty, and that they involve one another. So something that is good is likely to be true, and something that is false is likely to be harmful.
Okay, so let's say if transgenderism was shown to be beneficial, I know you don't believe that, would it then be true?
I'm confident that it won't be shown to be beneficial.
But if it was, would you then, is that really?
You know, you're asking me if, you know, if 2 + 2 equaled 5, would that change my view of mathematics? I suppose it would. But, you know, the reason that I'm so confident, every time some pro-trans activist comes out and says, there is a new study that shows the brain scans of Bruce Jenner mean that he's really, you know, a lady or whatever, and then it never turns out to be
Are
true.
you doing the
It's
whole
always-
perception is real? Like if it was beneficial to me to believe in unicorns, does that make unicorns real?
I don't think I guess our disagreement would go back one step even further. I don't think it's beneficial to believe in fantasies. I think that
So that's what people don't like religion.
You
no,
got
but
it
I
as a
think, you know,
fantasy.
I agree that atheists and liberals have denigrated religion for centuries now, but I don't think it's a fantasy. I don't think that it's just a comforting thought.
Neither do transgender. Like, my point
right,
is
but they're wrong and I'm right, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it goes
But one of
down
us
to.
is going to be right.
What makes you believe that that Catholic doctrine is true?
Well, I believe, to quote the First Vatican Council, that the existence of God, I'm not saying all the other stuff, but the existence of God can be known with certainty by natural human reason from the created world.
Yeah, I'm not debating about the existence of God. I'm saying specifically Catholic doctrine, that it goes
Right.
beyond
So
just
if we
existence
all
of God.
agree that God exists and can be known through reason, and maybe we're making a leap there, but you seem at least to
Definitely
grant
a
it.
leap.
But at least you grant it. Then the question is, okay, well, who is God? And here is where revelation gets involved. And
But is revelation not just
Why not the Viking god?
Wait, is revelation not just like the word of somebody else essentially claiming to like have these truths revealed by
it's
God?
the word of a great many people played out throughout history. So, for instance, it was very recently Christmas, and so the revelation of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is in the incarnation, and then he lives for 33 years, and then suffers a passion, is crucified, and is resurrected on the third day. At least that's how the story goes, right? Well, why would I believe that story? What reason do I have to believe? That's a crazy story, isn't it? People don't just rise from the dead. Well, part of the reason I might believe it is because the gospel accounts were all written within living memory. Part of the reason I might believe this is because 11 men went to their deaths to defend, a fable? To defend 11 men just all suffered the same defect of perception. One of the reasons I would believe it is it's attested to in non-Christian history. One of the reasons I might believe this is that there were 500 witnesses to the resurrection. So, and then another reason I might witness this, which gets to your point of the relation between goodness and truth, is that religion spread to the entire world, and we haven't even gotten into the other historical coincidences of this, and led to a civilization that was extraordinarily powerful, flourishing. I mean, nothing like it has ever existed on the face of the earth, and never would again if it were to go away. This would all seem to point to at least some little kernel of truth in that.
I guess
Final thing, and then I will move on. Go ahead.
Final thoughts on that. To me, it doesn't necessarily follow that just because like a lot of people believe something, it means that there's a kernel of truth to it, right? I feel like
not necessarily.
Yeah, it seems to me that the same arguments that you used could be used when it comes to like trying to justify Islam, for example. That a lot of people have gone and fight and died
Islam
for it.
didn't spread peacefully as Christianity did.
But the
Fastest growing religion, so isn't it?
Yeah, it's still the fastest growing religion right now. But the point that I'm trying to get across is that ultimately it seems like your belief in the Catholic faith and doctrine goes back to like, hey, a lot of other people seem to believe this, so then that leads to
perhaps I
misspoke.
Quick
response.
Yes,
Okay.
a quick version of it. Perhaps I misspoke. My faith in the Catholic religion comes down to the existence of God being knowable through reason and the identification of God with the Logos. This would be something different than, say, in Islam, where Allah is totally transcendent. And as Ibn Hazm, the medieval Islamic writer, said, if God so willed it, he could make people worship idols. So mine identifies God with reason. So it's not just mere hearsay. Then there is a little bit of hearsay because all these people saw it and believed it and spread it throughout all of the world. And the religion was extraordinarily successful. And in that spread, one final difference, I suppose, is that with maybe two exceptions, Christianity spread peacefully everywhere that it spread. The two exceptions would be Charlemagne and I guess the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah.
With Islam spread violently everywhere that it spread. And so I'm not even knocking the Muslims, I'm just pointing out one was reliant largely on reason, and so it would seem to me that the faith is reasonable.